Every gas station in America is essentially the same. Grimy floors, questionable restrooms, and a hot dog that has been rotating on a heated rack since the previous administration. Nobody enjoys stopping at one, and yet everyone does, because the highway offers no alternative, and desperation is a reliable business model. But one man from Texas looked at that dynamic in 1982 and asked the simplest question in the history of retail. What if someone just made a better gas station? 44 years later, that question is worth $2 billion and has the cleanest bathrooms you have ever seen off an interstate. Let's unmask the full story behind Buc-ee's. The teaser. Why this story is more interesting than it sounds. Before we get into the numbers and the brisket and the world record car wash, let's establish something important about what kind of story this actually is, because it's not the kind that typically gets told about $2 billion empires, and it's considerably more interesting for that reason. There was no disruption here. No technology pivot, no venture capital, no viral moment that changed everything overnight, no business school thesis about reimagining the consumer experience through a proprietary app. Buc-ee's is a gas station. It sells fuel and snacks and branded merchandise and, famously, the cleanest restroom experience available to the American road tripper. The founder did not invent anything. He did not identify an emerging market or position himself ahead of a demographic wave. He just noticed that every gas station he stopped at during his daily commute was terrible, and decided that if he built one that wasn't, people would go out of their way to find it. He was right, and the rightness of that observation, executed with a level of obsessive discipline across 4 decades, produced something that analysts now value somewhere between $2 billion and $6 billion depending on their methodology. That holds 2 Guinness World Records. That has a cult following intense enough that families plan road trips specifically around the stops, rather than the destinations. And that is still owned entirely by the same 2 men who started it, who have never sold a single share of equity to anyone, and appear to have no intention of starting. That's the story. A Texas construction graduate, a childhood nickname, a Labrador retriever, and the conviction that travelers deserved something better than what they were being given. Everything else, the 69 locations, the 120 fuel pumps per store, the fresh-cut brisket, the Beaver nuggets that grown adults describe with genuine emotional attachment, flows from that original, stubbornly simple idea and the partnership that built it into something extraordinary. The man, the nickname, and the decision that started everything. Arch Beaver, Aplin III grew up in Lake Jackson, Texas, a small Gulf Coast city south of Houston, where his father worked as a home builder, and the family culture was steeped in construction and entrepreneurship. He enrolled at Texas A&M University and studied construction science, which is exactly the degree you choose when you plan to spend your career building large structures for other people. He graduated in 1980 with a trajectory that pointed clearly toward skyscrapers and office buildings, and then something happened on his daily commute that redirected 40 years of his professional life. What happened was that he kept stopping at gas stations, and every single one of them was terrible. Not terrible in a dramatic or exceptional way, but terrible in the specific, normalized way that an entire industry can be terrible when its customers have no alternative and therefore no leverage. Dirty floors, hostile staff, restrooms that made you reconsider whether you actually needed to stop, shelves stocked with the kind of inventory that suggested nobody responsible for purchasing had ever spoken to an actual traveler. The gas stations were profitable not because they were good, but because drivers on a highway have to stop somewhere, and somewhere was all they offered. Aplin's insight was not complicated. It was almost embarrassingly straightforward, which is probably why nobody in the industry had acted on it. If you built a gas station that was genuinely clean, genuinely well-stocked, and staffed by people who treated customers like an asset rather than an inconvenience, travelers would go out of their way to find you. And the loyalty that experience generated would be worth more, over the long run, than any fuel pricing advantage or highway location monopoly your competitors relied on. The name came from 2 sources that tell you something warm and unpretentious about the man behind the brand. His childhood nickname, Beaver, had come from Buc-ee the Beaver, the animated mascot of Ipana toothpaste. His Labrador retriever was named Buck. He combined them, put a smiling cartoon beaver in a baseball cap on the sign, and opened his first store on July 28, 1982 at 899 Oyster Creek Drive in Lake Jackson. a modest 3,000 square foot convenience store with a handful of gas pumps and a mission statement that has never changed in the 44 years since. Clean, friendly, in stock. That's it. That's the whole philosophy, and everything Buc-ee's has ever built is an elaboration of those three words. 2 men, 1 desk, and 44 years. The Buc-ee's story cannot be told without Don Wasek, and the fact that most people telling it don't spend enough time on the partnership is one of the more significant gaps in the public understanding of how this company actually works. Aplin and Wasek have been 50-50 partners from the beginning, and that number has never changed. Not when the company was struggling through its early years, not when it became a Texas phenomenon, not when analysts started throwing around billion-dollar valuations, and not when private equity firms presumably started calling with offers that could have made both men wealthy beyond any practical need. The split has held because the partnership has held, and the partnership has held because the 2 men complement each other in ways that most business partnerships never quite manage to achieve. Where Aplin provided the vision, the marketing instinct, and the construction expertise that designed the customer experience, Wasek brought the operational discipline that actually made the experience replicable at scale. Aplin thought about what a Buc-ee's should feel like. Wasek thought about what it took to make it feel that way at 6 in the morning and 2 in the morning and every hour in between, across stores spanning tens of thousands of square feet, staffed by hundreds of people who needed to deliver the same standard consistently enough that a customer who had visited the Lake Jackson location in 1992 would walk into the Katy, Texas location in 2015 and feel immediately at home. The detail that keeps appearing in accounts of the founding era is that Aplin and Wasek shared a single desk for the first 3 years of their partnership. That's not a charming anecdote about humble beginnings. It's a description of how intimately intertwined their working lives were from the start, how completely the success of one depended on the functioning of the other, and how early they established the level of mutual trust that a 50-50 partnership requires to survive the kinds of pressures that eventually destroy most of them. 44 years later, there is no public record of a significant disagreement between them, no buyout attempt, no dilution of the original split, and no apparent desire from either man to change an arrangement that has worked at every stage of the company's growth. That partnership structure is not incidental to Buc-ee's success. It is one of its foundational elements, because the 50-50 split with no outside equity means every decision about the company has been made by exactly 2 people who have been aligned in their philosophy from the beginning and who answer to nobody else. No board, no investors, no quarterly earnings pressure, no activist shareholders demanding margin improvements that would require cutting the wages or the cleanliness standards that the whole model depends on. Just 2 men from Texas who agreed on what they were building and built it together. The Luling decision and what followed after. For the first 21 years of its existence, Buc-ee's was a Texas convenience store chain that Texans loved and the rest of America had never heard of. By 2002, the company had grown steadily through careful expansion along Texas highways, refining the format and the culture and the supply chain until everything was working the way Aplin and Wasek needed it to work. Total chain sales stood at $63 million. The stores were profitable and well-regarded, and a less ambitious founding team would have been satisfied with what they had built. Aplin and Wasek were not satisfied because they had been developing an idea about what a convenience store could be if it was given enough space to actually become what travelers needed rather than just what the industry had always offered. In 2003, they chose a plot of land off Interstate 10 in Luling, Texas, a town of about 6,000 people sitting midway between Houston and San Antonio, and built something the convenience store industry had genuinely never seen before. The Luling store opened as a 10,764 square foot family travel center with more gas pumps than any competitor in the market, an expansive retail floor, abundant seating, and restrooms designed with a level of care and grandeur that the industry had always reserved for things other than the room customers actually needed most urgently. The message was immediate and unmistakable. This was not an upgraded convenience store. This was a different category of thing wearing a convenience store's name, and travelers responded to it in a way that exceeded anything Aplin and Wasek had modeled. Before Luling, total chain sales were $63 million. By 2006, just 3 years after the new format launched, sales had tripled to $202 million. By 2015, that figure had risen to $959 million, nearly a 16-fold increase in roughly 12 years, driven not by opening hundreds of stores, but by deliberately scaling the travel center format, with each new location larger and more elaborate than the previous one. The Luling decision crystallized the strategic logic that would govern every subsequent expansion. Go bigger than anyone thinks is necessary. Position at the geographic sweet spot where road trip fatigue peaks, and make the experience so definitively better than the alternative that customers don't just stop there. They plan around stopping there. The billboards followed, appearing along Texas highways and counting down miles in a cascade of bathroom humor, dad jokes, and urgency-building promises about what awaited at the next exit. A Gas Buddy study found that 40% of Americans worry about finding a clean restroom on a road trip, and Buc-ee's billboards speak directly to that anxiety with a precision that suggests someone who understood behavioral psychology long before the industry had language for it. On a Texas highway, you might see 19 Buc-ee's billboards before reaching the exit. By the time you pull in, the sale was closed 30 miles ago. The product. Why people drive an hour out of their way for a gas station. Let's talk about what a Buc-ee's actually is when you walk in, because the experience is genuinely difficult to convey to someone who hasn't had it, and central to understanding why the financial model works the way it does. The average Buc-ee's travel center today spans between 50,000 and 75,000 square feet, with 80 to 120 fuel pumps outside. For context, a standard convenience store covers roughly 2,500 square feet, which means a single Buc-ee's is 20 to 30 times the size of what the industry considers a normal store. Calling both formats convenience stores is a bit like calling both a rowboat and an aircraft carrier boats. Technically accurate and practically meaningless as a comparison. The fuel operation alone creates a customer experience that most gas stations are structurally incapable of offering. With 80 to 120 dispensers serving vehicles simultaneously, there is virtually never a wait, which matters to road-tripping families in a way that is difficult to overstate and which generates the kind of wholesale fuel purchasing volume that gives Buc-ee's significant leverage with suppliers. But the fuel is almost secondary to what happens once you walk through the doors, because the interior of a Buc-ee's operates more like an extremely well-curated specialty retailer than anything the convenience store industry produced before Aplin started scaling the format. Fresh-cut brisket carved in front of you. A wall of beef jerky in more varieties than most people knew existed. Fudge made on site in flavors that change by location. A merchandise section selling branded Buc-ee's clothing and accessories with the kind of loyalty-driven demand that consumer goods companies spend hundreds of millions in advertising trying to manufacture. And Beaver nuggets, caramel-coated puffed corn that has become the chain's signature product, and that generates the kind of devoted, multi-generational emotional attachment that most food brands can only envy from a distance. The private label strategy driving much of this is one of the least discussed but most financially significant elements of the model. Standard convenience stores earn approximately 32% margins on nationally branded goods. Buc-ee's merchandise earns approximately 40% margins on its proprietary products, and by building those products into the emotional core of the brand, making them the thing people come back for, the thing they buy as road trip souvenirs, the thing they post about. The company has created a revenue stream that functions more like a specialty retailer than a gas station, while benefiting from the traffic volume that fuel sales generate. The no-truck policy completes the picture. Buc-ee's categorically prohibits commercial vehicles and semi-trailers, which immediately differentiates the parking lot experience, the interior atmosphere, and the customer demographic from traditional truck stops. By refusing to be everything to everyone, the company became perfect for traveling families with disposable income. The Apple Store philosophy applied to a gas station, with results that suggest the philosophy translates across industries more broadly than most people would have predicted. The people, why they pay more, and why it matters. Here's the part of the Buc-ee's business model that the financial press tends to undervalue because it's harder to quantify than revenue per square foot, but which the company's own general counsel has identified as the engine that makes everything else function. Buc-ee's starts its employees at $18 per hour, more than double the federal minimum wage. With grocery department managers earning approximately $31 per hour, and general managers earning over $225,000 annually. The benefits package includes a 401k with a 6% employer match, 3 weeks of paid time off, and full medical, dental, and vision coverage, which is a benefit structure that would be notable in any industry and is particularly striking in convenience retail, where high turnover and minimal compensation have been industry norms for decades. The logic behind this compensation philosophy is articulated by General Counsel Jeff Nadalo, with a directness that cuts through the usual corporate language around people investment. When you pay for the best employees, you get the best customer experience. When you deliver the best customer experience, customers come back. When customers come back, you can afford the best employees. It's a self-reinforcing cycle, and the key insight embedded in it is that cutting labor costs would not improve the model. It would destroy it, because the entire competitive advantage of Buc-ee's rests on delivering an experience so consistently superior to the alternative that customers develop genuine loyalty to a gas station, which is not something that happens without the people behind the counter being invested in making it happen. Each Buc-ee's location employs approximately 250 people and maintaining world-class cleanliness standards in a 75,000 square foot facility that operates 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, requires a level of sustained operational attention that above-market compensation is specifically designed to sustain. The restrooms that people genuinely rave about on social media don't stay in that condition by accident. They stay that way because the people responsible for keeping them that way are being paid enough to care consistently, which is an investment that pays for itself in the repeat visitation and word-of-mouth marketing that Buc-ee's has built its entire growth strategy around. In the 2025 Dunnhumby Convenience Retailer Preference Index, Buc-ee's ranked first among all U.S. convenience retailers, scoring 17 points ahead of second-place Sheetz, a result achieved with approximately 69 locations against competitors operating over 1,000 each. That is the return on the labor investment, expressed as a brand equity number that no amount of advertising spending could have purchased from the outside. The expansion. 44 years of patience and acceleration. One of the most instructive and least discussed facts about Buc-ee's is that for the first 37 years of its existence, the company didn't open a single store outside Texas. Not one. While competitors were racing to expand nationally, acquiring regional chains and chasing scale as an end in itself, Aplin and Wasek spent nearly 4 decades building something essentially invincible within their home state before they exported it anywhere. The discipline required to do that, to resist the pressure to grow faster than your operational culture can be maintained, to keep building and refining the product in a single market until every element is working well enough to survive replication, is the kind of patience that public market pressure makes structurally impossible. Which is precisely why the decision to never take outside equity was not just a philosophical preference but a strategic prerequisite. An investor with a 10-year horizon cannot fund 37 years of Texas-only expansion. The Buc-ee's timeline required owners who were playing a game with no predetermined exit, and Aplin and Wasek were exactly that. The first store outside Texas opened in Alabama in 2019, and from that point the expansion has been methodical but accelerating. Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, South Carolina, Tennessee, Missouri, Colorado, with confirmed plans for Arizona, Arkansas, Kansas, Louisiana, North Carolina, Ohio, and Wisconsin. Each location is financed entirely through bank debt rather than equity dilution, with total project costs running between $60 million and nearly $95 million per site. The Kansas City location that broke ground in October 2025 carried a project cost of $94.8 million, and across 17 or more planned pipeline sites, the company is committing an estimated $1 billion to $1.5 billion in total development investment. All of it funded without selling a share of ownership to anyone. The funding mechanism that makes this possible without dilution is the municipal incentive structure that Buc-ee's has become extraordinarily effective at negotiating, because communities competing to attract the tax revenue and employment that a Buc-ee's location generates are willing to offer terms that meaningfully reduce the capital burden of each new build. Harrison County, Mississippi, approved $25 million in tax increment financing. Loxley, Alabama granted a 20-year deal allowing the company to retain 37.5% of sales tax revenue. San Marcos, Texas promised a 50% sales tax rebate over 15 years worth $3.2 million. Aplin has acknowledged this dynamic directly. The stores are expensive enough to build that municipal support makes the economics of each new location significantly more viable. And the brand's drawing power gives Buc-ee's genuine leverage in those negotiations. The two Guinness World Records that have arrived during this expansion phase: the world's largest convenience store at the Luling replacement location, 75,593 square feet, opened June 2024, and the world's longest car wash at the Katy, Texas store, 255 feet, recognized November 2021, are not marketing stunts. They're the natural result of a company that has been deliberately building larger and more elaborate than industry precedent suggested was necessary for 44 years, and which has been right about that judgment at every stage. The Empire, and it's the future. Buc-ee's FAQ page addresses the question of a public offering with a bluntness that is almost refreshing in the context of modern corporate communication. Buc-ee's is privately owned. We have no plans at this time of becoming publicly traded. That sentence is not a hedge or a temporary position pending favorable market conditions. It is a statement of philosophy that has governed every financial and strategic decision the company has made for 4 decades, and understanding why Aplin and Wasek hold it so firmly is the key to understanding everything else about how they built what they built. Going public would mean quarterly earnings calls with analysts who want to understand why labor costs are higher than industry benchmarks. It would mean activist investors who see the no-truck policy as an unnecessary restriction on addressable market. It would mean pressure to accelerate expansion faster than the operational culture can travel with it, which is the mechanism through which beloved regional brands consistently destroy themselves in the pursuit of shareholder returns. The story of American retail is filled with companies that were exceptional at a regional scale, took outside capital to grow nationally, and arrived at the national stage as a diluted, compromised version of what made them worth caring about in the first place. Aplin and Wasek have watched that pattern play out across their industry for 44 years and have made a different choice at every decision point where it was available to them. The $2 billion valuation that analysts attach to Buc-ee's using comparable public companies as benchmarks is real money, but it represents the floor of what the company is worth to its owners in its current form, not the ceiling of what they could extract by taking it public and managing the institutional pressure that would follow. They have calculated, correctly by any observable measure, that the freedom to build exactly the stores they want, hire exactly the people they want to hire, and pay those people exactly what the model requires is worth more than any premium a public market would offer for the privilege of second-guessing those decisions quarterly. The Mercedes-Benz partnership announced in November 2023, bringing high-speed electric vehicle charging hubs to approximately 30 locations powered by 100% renewable energy, signals that Aplin is thinking about the next phase of the company's relevance with the same long-term patience he brought to the first 37 years. The math on EV charging is actually favorable to Buc-ee's in a way that most people haven't noticed. A customer spending 30 minutes charging rather than 5 minutes fueling is a customer who has 30 minutes to browse the merchandise, eat the brisket, buy the Beaver nuggets, and develop the kind of brand attachment that brings them back on the next road trip. The stores that were already oversized for the fuel stop model are perfectly sized for the charging stop model, which suggests that what looked like excess when Aplin started building them is going to look like foresight when the transition accelerates. The original Luling Travel Center, the 2003 store that transformed Buc-ee's from a regional chain into a national phenomenon, caught fire during its demolition in June 2024 as the new 75,000 square foot world record replacement opened beside it. Aplin was there, reportedly wearing a Buc-ee's branded baseball cap, watching the building that had started everything burn, while the next version of it stood finished and open beside him. It's the kind of image that a Hollywood screenwriter might invent to capture a transition from one era to the next. But it happened in real life to a man who built a $2 billion empire by asking, what if someone just made a better gas station? And then spent 44 years answering his own question with obsessive, patient, unglamorous discipline. He was right about the gas station. He was right about the restrooms. He was right about the brisket and the Beaver nuggets and the no-truck policy and the 50-50 partnership, and the decision to never sell a share of equity to anyone. Two men from Texas, one desk between them for the first 3 years, and the conviction that travelers deserved something better than what they were being given. Everything else is just what happened when they were right about all of it at once for 4 decades straight, without asking anyone's permission. If stories about the people and families who built the most interesting empires in American business are what brought you here, subscribe to Global Status, and we'll keep delivering them. See you in the next one.